Podcast listeners, we have Go Woke or Go Broke. No surprise that our Go Woke or Go Broke, this particular podcast is a game changer because it's about MLB, the Major League Baseball, because Major League Baseball has decided to go woke. So, you know, and you've heard some of this story before, but we have a bunch of clips from different media outlets that you're going to really enjoy listening to and probably get really mad after you hear them, I'm sure, because certainly I have. So Major League Baseball announces a relocation of their annual All-Star game out of Georgia due to the new voter laws and regulations passed in the state. However, the organization moved the game to a venue in Colorado where laws are just as strict and perhaps even worse. Following the passage of voter laws in Georgia requiring an ID to vote, as well as a few other regulations, the left took to the disenfranchisement defense to call out for a complete Georgia boycott. This included pressure on executives with the MLB, who plan to hold their annual All-Star game there later this year in July. Colorado, where the MLB moved their All-Star game venue to, already requires voter ID when you vote in person and signature verification for mail-in ballots. Well, so then what is the point of moving out of Georgia and moving to Colorado if Colorado already has these laws? Well, because, you know, if you're Major League Baseball, all it requires is for Stacey Abrams, the racist in Atlanta, to call you up and say, you know what? These are racist policies. People who are black can't show an ID. That's wrong. That's wrong. They can't show an ID because they don't have an ID. I mean, that's actually insulting to people who are black. And it's also insulting to everyone because you need, if you're destitute and you're on food stamps or you're on any kind of welfare program, no matter what it is, the government needs to know who you are and they need to know your ID. And we've talked about this a million times, but who would have thought our Go Woke or Go Broke would be about the MLB going woke, thus deciding, because of a new law that requires voter ID, among other things, in Atlanta, in the state of Georgia, that MLB is going to move their All-Star game. So we have a number of clips on this, and here is first up, Brian Kemp, he's the governor of Georgia, on what the bill actually does. We have that clip, and here it is.
The bill does. It actually adds opportunities for people to vote. It secures ballot drop boxes that were never in the law before we passed this legislation, requires continuous counting, simply uses a voter ID, which is free in Georgia. We've been using for in-person voting since the mid-2000s for absentees, since we had 350% increase in mail ballots this election to help the county elections officials be more efficient and be more secure and take an arbitrary process out. I mean, how is that suppression? It is not. It's just a buzzword that they use. Then they go to the CEOs and the corporate boardrooms and they browbeat these people to falling under pressure. And that's exactly what's happened.
And that's what Brian Kemp said, what we just said, which is these large corporations like Coke, which is based in Atlanta, Georgia, were browbeat by the BLM activists and others saying, you have to do something about this because this is racist, this is wrong. And the big corporations, instead of saying, you know what we do? We sell Coke for a living. That's what we do. Nothing else. We're not interested in getting involved in politics at this level. We sell Coke, and we hope that you like Coke, and we hope that everybody likes Coke. That's what a good CEO would say. You know, thank you very much. You're involved in politics. We're not. Good for you. Good luck to you. But no, Coke decided, of course, to get involved. MLB decided to get involved, and all these bigwigs in corporate America, you know, the elites who run these large corporations that you're not allowed to ever run because you're a nobody. Those elites decide, of course, work together and decide that the MLB is going to move. And so I have to also say this. In the state of Georgia, they decided in 2020, very last minute, to put ballot drop boxes everywhere because so many absentee ballots were mailed out to people, right? Because of the pandemic. So you have these ballot drop boxes. They weren't secured. They weren't video recorded. There was no monitoring of them whatsoever. And Georgia decided that, well, since Stacey Abrams wants mass mail-in ballots, that's what she wants from this point forward because that worked so well for her last time. Brian Kemp and the state of Georgia, and really, I think the people of this country look at this and say, there needs to be a way to make this more transparent and more reliable so that people don't say, you cheated, right? I agree. So what Kemp decided to do was they expanded in-person voting and early voting so it's now 17 days. In addition to that, the ballot drop boxes are now secured. By secured, I presume that means they're being monitored, okay? They're being monitored, which means you can't ballot harvest and cheat. What a surprise. Stacey Abrams, of course, is very mad at that, as is BLM and Antifa. And then lastly, Brian Kemp said, look, we already have voter ID when you go and vote in person, but when you vote by mail, we want to make sure it is you. So we want on your mail-in ballot to put on there your driver's license ID number or some identification that we know it was you, because that unique number, which usually is a very long number, of course, on your driver's license, is unique to you, and it would be very difficult to ascertain that from someone. And not to mention signature verification. All of these things are perfectly reasonable because it increases transparency and reliability of the vote. Of course, the best way to do that would be to vote in person and show ID, but nonetheless, Kemp has met them halfway and said, okay, we're going to keep the ballot drop boxes. We're going to expand early voting. And in addition to that, we're going to make sure the ballot drop boxes are secure and that you have to provide voter ID information on your mail-in ballot. All reasonable stuff. Well, but not to CNN, because Don Lemon, the infamous idiot from CNN, and probably one of the dumber people on CNN, and that's really saying a lot, interviewed legendary sportscaster Bob Costas about the MLB moving all-star games out of Atlanta. And we have that clip, and here it is.
So in response to Georgia's new law that makes it harder for people of color to vote, Major League Baseball moving this season's All-Star game out of Atlanta, the commissioner explaining the decision in the statement saying Major League Baseball fundamentally supports voting rights for all Americans and opposes restrictions at the ballot box. The Atlanta Braves, who were going to be hosting the game, saying that they are, quote, deeply disappointed, adding that they had hoped our city could use this event as a platform to enhance the discussion.
So of course, that was to Bob Costas from Don Lemon. And now we have Bob Costas, the famous sportscaster, the legendary sportscaster. We have his response, and here it is.
Yeah, you can claim, as Governor Kemp did, that there are certain provisions within this bill that will enhance access to voting. But in the overall, on balance, it actually restricts voting, and it's clear that it will most negatively impact people of color and people at the lower end of the economic scale. And so this is what baseball has decided to do.
A complete and utter lie. A complete and utter lie. Ladies and gentlemen, you have 17 days to vote early in the state of Georgia in person. 17 days. And I have to tell you something, I think that's too many days. I think a week of early voting is enough. I think 17 early days of voting is absurd. And the idea that Bob Costas said that they're trying to restrict voting is probably one of the most idiotic things I've ever heard from a sportscaster or from anyone for that reason. They know nothing about election law. Nothing, these people. Yet they're commenting and they're trying to do the same thing that we heard all last year in 2020, which is to compare it to Jim Crow, which is a bold-faced lie, and its whole purpose is to keep people who are black on the Democrat plantation, to make them terrified, even though the Democrats are the ones who did own the plantations in Georgia, just by the way. And so here's Fox News and Governor Brian Kemp talking about voter transparency in Georgia. And of course, it's all about Jim Crow. We have that clip, and here it is.
Whatever. Like, none of them are pointing to specifics in the bill because they know damn well their people were in the Capitol working with us on the bill. They knew what was in it, and now their position has changed.
Right. They just say Jim Crow, and they don't explain.
That's right.
Exactly. And that's what Stacey Abrams does, and that's what BLM does, and that's what Antifa does, and all these activists. They call up these woke corporations, and they call up now the MLB, of course, and other large organizations that are sports organizations, and now, of course, even Bob Costas, and they're getting them involved and drawing them in, saying it's Jim Crow. After all, it is Georgia. What else could it be? It has to be Jim Crow. Jim Crow. So Jim Crow is when you expand voting for early voting. Jim Crow is when you require ID on the absentee ballots, but yet you were expanding absentee ballots. And Jim Crow is when you actually have those drop boxes monitored, namely with video cameras, to make sure that people aren't tampering with them and that people aren't putting in thousands of ballots as a result of ballot harvesting, which I think probably happened in 2020 because that was Stacey Abrams' game. And the fact of the matter is, you should be able to vote yourself. There are plenty of ways for you to do that and to get assistance. And you have 17 days to do it early, or you can vote by mail. But we had Brian Kemp again finally explaining in great detail, and this clip's a little long, but it's worth it, because he really talks about the details of this bill and of the issue and frames it really well. We're going to finish this particular segment with this clip. Listen very carefully. Here it is.
Well, it's unfortunate that Major League Baseball has caved to the cancel culture. And quite honestly, President Biden and Stacey Abrams and a lot of other people are simply lying about this bill to pressure these organizations. It's really a sad day for Major League Baseball. As somebody that grew up playing baseball as a kid and a fan, played in high school, big Braves fan. I mean, this is terrible for the organization. It's terrible for the fans. It's terrible for the small business owners in the Metro Atlanta community in our state that was looking forward to hosting this game, and it put a lot of resources into it, all because of a big lie. I mean, this bill does not suppress anything. In fact, New York, where Major League Baseball is headquarters, their voting laws are more restrictive when it comes to early voting than Georgia's are. We have 17 days of in-person early voting. New York has 10. This bill adds the opportunity for people potentially to vote on 2 optional Sundays, which would give potentially some counties 19 days. Are we boycotting them because they're in New York? No. This is just a cancel culture. And I will tell you, the people at home should be scared because their ball game is next. Their business will be next. Their way of life will be next.
Yep, coming to a town and a state near you is BLM basically calling you out and saying that your policies are like Jim Crow, and then getting corporate America involved, and then Major League Sports involved, and anyone else who wants to get involved, in which case they are trying to ruin your life. And they're trying to ruin Kemp's life, the governor of Georgia, by telling him he is trying to implement Jim Crow policies to stop people from voting. It's just really absurd, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope that we can have this discussion. We're actually going to have this discussion, to tell you the truth, about some other states as well. We're going to bring in some experts on this subject matter, but also we're going to bring in some people who are from the other side of the aisle, and to really hear them talk about the fact that they believe it's Jim Crow. You're bringing us back to Jim Crow by expanding voting opportunities. Just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And that is go woke or go broke. The MLB decides to go woke.